round 3, I played against Bloody Oath. I have not played against the Bloodfire Colossus in a long time, and I definitely didn't want to see it when I was playing Elves. Yeah, he played a turn 2 Oath, and Oath did the Bloodfire Colossus, and I was like, this is it. This is how my day ends.
Hey yo, it's Fact or Fiction. You ready to play? Fact or Fiction. Grab a slice. Tell me what you know. Goblins in the kitchen. Fact or Fiction. Roll the dice. This game's about to blow. Let's go.
Welcome to Fact or Fiction, a podcast about Magic the Gathering's greatest format, pre-modern. On today's episode, we have, fresh off his win from the Shoe City Showdown, Ben Bauer. We talked to him about playing his deck Elves, how his tournament went, how his journey got him there, and we're going to even talk about a fire alarm that went off in the middle of the tournament as well, too. So we got a pretty good episode today, and let's dive right in. Ben, congratulations on winning the tournament.
Definitely. Thanks, Neal. Nice to see everybody. Chris, Sam. I am a little disappointed, though. When you're on the podcast, you don't get to hear the fancy intro and song. It's been in my head all day.
We'll throw it in for you.
Perfect.
So Ben, you're from the Zoo Crew. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your crew, how you got into pre-modern, and why is Elves your deck of choice?
Absolutely. Yeah. Zoo Crew is a crew, self-proclaimed rivals of the Duress crew, but we've got so many crews in Massachusetts now. I don't think you could be rivals with just one. But they're mostly based out of Marlborough, Massachusetts. That's where Shoe City was held. But most of us play at ELD's weeklies. So that's where I met the group of guys. I play there Tuesday nights. But I'm a little orphan that joined their crew. I'm actually on the Cape in Massachusetts. And I'm new to the area even. I lived in Pittsburgh for a few years prior, and that's where I learned pre-modern. Good group of guys there that play pre-modern and old Magic. And yeah, pre-modern was just a breath of fresh air after all the competitive Magic and Universes Beyond and Modern Horizons 1, 2, 3, 4, who knows how many they're going to have. Yeah, that's a little bit about me and Zoo Crew.
Well, yeah, no, definitely. You kind of struck a chord with me, and I'm sure with everyone else who's listening to it, the Universes Beyond as well, too. There definitely can be some set fatigue and a bunch of different cards that are coming out every month, having to worry about that for a metagame. But pre-modern, we get to focus on the old cards. It doesn't change too much, so I agree with you there. Definitely a breath of fresh air, and it's a community-controlled format as well, too, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and pre-modern is cool to me. I'm a younger player, so a lot of these cards I didn't grow up with, but I grew up with the worst versions of them. So I knew Fauna Shaman before I knew Survival of the Fittest. And so playing with the originals is very cool to me. So that's up there one of the best parts of pre-modern.
I'm similar to where I didn't know, I didn't grow up with a lot of these cards as well too. I thought it was cool that with pre-modern I learned that some modern cards I know were actually inspired by the older ones. For instance, I never knew Engineered Plague existed before playing pre-modern, and then I'm like, oh, that's where Plague Engineer comes from, and everything like that. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's cool like that. And then I also learn over time that a lot of pre-modern archetypes still are famous archetypes from one point in Magic's history, where I'm like, I've known the history of Dead Guy Ale or something, but I didn't realize just how many decks actually were a thing and not even that different in Magic's history compared to the build they have in pre-modern. I've always found that really cool too.
The card Ben mentioned, Fauna Shaman, was a card I definitely played in Standard, and that card was kind of mid, but it was playable. And Survival of the Fittest is just a straight up messed up Magic card, and you can do some crazy things with it, most notably usually starting with Sligh. So I wanted to call that out. But Ben, you know a thing or two about Survival of the Fittest. I would assume that's correct to say, right?
Yeah, that's a good pivot back to the original question, which is why I drawn to Elves, and I think it's the best Survival of the Fittest deck. It's Survival of the Fittest is where the I think back in Modern in the day, we used to talk about Pillars of Modern, and it would be the most busted cards. And so Pillars at pre-Modern, I think Survival of the Fittest is definitely up there. It could be the best, but it's suppressed by some of the other pillars, like Opal Wave existing is a good thing, because if that was gone, Survival of the Fittest would probably run rampant and the format would be a slog to play. But nonetheless, very powerful, and that's a big part of why I like to play Elves.
Awesome. And you've had a pretty good string of tournaments playing Elves. Top 8'd LobsterCon, you won Shoe City, and I think it would be very interesting for a lot of our listeners to hear your thought process behind the deck, how to pilot it. But I think the first question I have to ask, because I see this all the time, is I see Elves and I see Cradle Control. What's the distinction between those two decks?
Yeah, and honestly, I might not be the best person to ask because I've never played Cradle Control. But I've consumed a lot of content because that seems like the trendy thing to do with Elves.
Sure.
And I could see how you get there as a hedge for all the weaknesses of Elves. But from a philosophy standpoint with Magic, especially in a best of 3 format, game 1, I want to do the busted thing first, and then I'm going to adjust to what they're going to adjust to me. I think Meguchi popularized this with Elves, but the whole Call of the Herd and walls in the sideboard strategy to supplement the vulnerabilities of the Elves in game 1 and to hedge around the sweepers is the origin of where I started with my list. But where it really evolved, I think, is where Elves has a lot of weaknesses if you think about it in a tournament. And there was just one too many where I was like, there's quite a few bad matchups if I'm thinking about it with the conventional list. If you don't want to play any of the red decks, and also decks like Replenish and HFAB, the list is just a little too long. So there exists Meguchi's good sideboard plan for the red decks, but when you have to win both sideboarded games, I still struggle to call a matchup favorable or even. So I wanted to add something to the main deck to increase equity there, and you can't really add Call the Herd or Wall the Blossoms into main deck Elves, but you can Wall the Brutes, and it started off as just a hedge against burn, but Wall of Brutes is just so excellent with Survival of the Fittest that it made my deck far more explosive, which has helped in a lot of other matchups. In this particular tournament, I beat Enchantress, and part of it is you could go turn 1 Elf, turn 2 Wall, Cradle, play Survival, activate Survival on their end step, and you're cooking. It's so strong.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Sorry. I just interjected because I was like, that's absolutely disgusting. pretty awesome of a play sequence there. But yeah, so you say you're more on the Elf side than the Cradle Control side.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing me back in. So Elves versus Cradle Control, that's Cradle Control takes a lot of those elements main deck, so they bring the wall main deck, just as I did, but at the cost of a lot of the untappers. And now you've introduced a tension of you're losing your most explosive draws despite adding wall, which can in itself also be explosive. But I would just rather be the proactive combo deck game 1 and then beat the mid-range control game 2 and 3, where your opponent still has to respect your potential combo draws. Again, I've never played Cradle Control, but in my head, I've never wanted to because that pitch is just so compelling to me to play Elves. If you're worried about Pyroclasm and Engineered Plague, those are sideboard cards. So game 1, I don't think you need to respect them as much.
I like the idea in general in Magic of having a deck that goldfishes as best as possible game 1 and adapts to sideboard plans too, because some people in deck construction, sideboard slots can be tight and they're like, oh, I can change a couple things in the main here so I can fit what I want over on the 75. But then sometimes they don't think about how you may be helping your points in some matches doing this game 1, but the amount of game 1 consistency, for instance, or goldfish ability, I would say, can be too big of a cost as well. And I like the idea of just trying to be as quick as possible game 1, where most people aren't going to have the correct tools to stop you in pre-sideboarded game.
I have a question. I think be easy one to go off. That's fine. So Ben, you know, I've known you to play Elves for quite a while now. You took it to LobsterCon, made a top 8 finish. How, how long have you been playing Elves? Is that the only deck you've played in pre-modern?
Yeah, so I started playing pre-modern. I built Oath Magnivore. Took that up to a couple tournaments. It was fun, but didn't do very well. Then I played Counter Rebels for about 2 months straight. And I actually got the list to a pretty good spot where I was 3-0ing ELD's weeklies. And I took basically a re-engineered blue-white flippy to LobsterCon 2025. And that's what I enjoyed to do. But right after that, I fell in love with pre-modern and I built pretty much every deck I could build. So once I got Cradles, I've always wanted to play Elves in a format. But in Modern, by the time I could play them, it was not a good deck. And then in Legacy, I couldn't afford real Cradles. Taking the opportunity to buy gold border Cradles was something I really wanted to do. And as soon as I had them, I knew this was one of the better decks I had that wasn't Dreadnought. And Dreadnought's awesome, but it's a little bit boring, a little bit more established at this point. So I wanted to take my time and really enjoy Elves. I also played a lot of Amulet Titan in Modern back in the day. And I think it's a weird parallel to Elves, but I feel a lot of the same muscle memory and skills that I've learned for playing Amulet. It's like a toolbox combo deck that I do with Elves in terms of just making ridiculous amounts of mana. And I've been playing Elves for probably, at this point, a year.
A pretty good year, I'd say, so far. Tournament win, a large top 8 at LobsterCon. I know we have you on to talk about Shoe City, but I think we don't tell the whole story if we don't start with LobsterCon. So why don't you take us through your process there for that tournament?
Definitely. And honestly, it goes before LobsterCon. I was sad that this got no publicity, but I top aided it was like November or October ELD's monthly with Elves featuring 3 Recycle.
I must have missed that one.
And I top 16 the Duress Crew Regional that winter with the same list. I got 10th. I lost my winning in. And so I loved it. I like Recycle is where I started with the deck. I thought it was really cool, but I was still playing Tangle Wire. And at about that time, that's where people were really exploring like Sylvan Library in the deck. And I wanted, again, Sylvan Library, you have to you play it and you have to pass and get the turn back to start accumulating the cards. Whereas Recycle, very, very much more expensive, but it was just a combo card you could win with. And that's really the origin of where I started thinking of Elves as like a true combo deck. And eventually, because I took my inspiration from Jens's list where he top 80 LobsterCon, the prior list where he was playing 3 port and 4 Tangle Wire. And I was doing that as well. And I got to a point where that no longer totally worked in the meta, as well as I think players have just got really good. I think originally Tangle Wire was great, but if you hear really good Dreadnought players talk about it, they're not afraid of the card. They just Vision Charm it, or they can manipulate their way around a Tangle Wire. And the same thing with the Replenish player. Wait for their Frantic Searches. And that felt pretty bad if those were like the best matchups where I wanted Tangle Wire in a competitive setting. So I decided at that point, it would just be better if I was just on a really strong plan A. And that also makes survival better because you're going to always have creatures to discard to survival for the most part, except for Recycle. So that's why I eventually got off Recycle. It's a little too cute. And so for LobsterCon this year, prep wise, Tide was banned. Unfortunately for an Elves player, that's a good card to have in the meta. But my head was at you need to be able to beat Dreadnought, but there are very few decks that beat Dreadnought and also beat the other good decks. At the same time, I was having pretty good success against Enchantress, and not such great success against Replenish. But Replenish theoretically was on the downswing because Tide was banned. So that's where I landed with Elves for LobsterCon 2026.
Yeah, I think that was a good thought process. I think we've covered a couple times on here that the consensus did seem that Replenish was on the downswing. Of course, the finals of LobsterCon ended up being a Replenish mirror. So we were all kind of proven wrong in that regard, except for maybe Brian and Brian. But Yeah, I think that's some pretty sound logic there, and I'm honestly surprised that you've only been playing Elves for a year, because you play it really well, and it definitely looks like you have a lot more experience than that. So I think that just speaks to your abilities as a player, which is pretty cool.
Thank you. It's funny. Some of my friends have started to ask for tips on how to play Elves, and I jokingly made a flow chart. Was just, can you cast Deranged Hermit? If yes, play it. If not, make enough mana that you can. And that's really just the operating model that I work under. And maybe it's not a great way to learn the deck, but I don't know. I don't have heuristics about how much mana you can make, and I really just take it turn by turn. And it's really just, can I put a Deranged Hermit on the table? That's probably what I'm going to do. If it's not lethal, I'll try to see if I could do a second Hermit. One more strategic thing about Elves that I was drawn to was just pre-modern is a format about mana denial and bad mana bases. And Elves has one of the best mana bases because it's a monocolor deck that utilizes Gaia's Cradle. So I would say it's the best mana base. And then its strategy is insulated against mana denial in a way that no other deck can really say. And so I think just strategically, it's in a really advantageous position amongst the card pool too.
I think that's a really good approach. You won't get any argument from me. I love decks that play mostly basic lands, whether they're mountains, islands, in this case, forests, and definitely having the ability to just play a Cradle and explode in one turn definitely gets around something like a Rishadan Port or a Wasteland. Obviously, it gets targeted by a Wasteland, but you get that one turn where you can just go off, and then you can always play another Cradle too. So that's, I think, an apt analysis of how to approach this format. Do something busted, have good mana. Might sound simple, but it's a proven process so far, it seems. So between LobsterCon and Shoe City, did you make any changes to the deck?
Yes. So I also played in the Summer Regional. So in between those two successful tournaments is one middle lane 3-3. Immediately following LobsterCon, I maybe overreacted to my quarterfinals loss to Replenish, but also Replenish won in the finals. So I felt like it's really important to have a good Replenish strategy. Not that I think you could fix the matchup, but something that can go back to my original plan, or my original comment, which is not just a sideboard card, but is there something strategically I could do game one to put myself in a better position for the matchup? And for that tournament, I decided I should just try and play 4 Plow Under. Unfortunately, I didn't do good enough to run into any of the Replenish pilots that day, so I never really got to test it out. But ultimately, it felt a little awkward, and I wanted to just reinforce the strategy that I brought to LobsterCon, which was 4 Deranged Hermits and a bunch of creatures. So the change I made to Shoe City was I wanted 6 Deranged Hermits, so I added Kamahl back into the deck, and then I added a Tribal Force Mage. So I just have 6 really good, not even including Manticore, mana dumps to top deck. And we could go into strategy later, but I mentioned in the Elves Discord, when I'm on a mulligan, my tendency is to keep a hand that does all the early things, so that by turn 3, I'll have a couple draw steps to find the bomb. And so adding to the deck in that section of cards, so your Voltani's Acolyte, your Survivals, and then your top end threats as viable top decks for when you have a board of just the untappers and mana producers, is something that I was interested in doing.
You talk about trying to figure out what you can do in the Replenish matchup, for instance, and adding more big top end bombs to the deck. One card I've seen Elves mess with in the past that I'm curious to hear your thoughts about is Biorhythm, because I always thought that was very interesting tech, especially against a match like Replenish theoretically, where if you ever successfully resolve the card, I would imagine it kills your opponent on the spot. But I am aware it's still an 8 mana card in a deck that still has Parallax Wave, for instance. But I'm just curious because I'm sure you've messed with it somewhat in the past.
Yeah, so I knew you were going to say Biorhythm when we started talking too. Everybody loves that card, and I'm included in that. But unfortunately, I'm not an authority on the subject because I found out about Biorhythm post Spike from its unbanning in Commander, and so all of my takes are going to be wallet conscious. And so I've been talking myself out of the card being But actually, I do think that it's probably more cute than good, or it's a sideboard card. And I think from a sideboard perspective, there are better cards against Replenish. Game one, it could be this tool that helps the matchup, but I think more often than not, you're going to wish it was a creature you could pitch to survival. And specifically in the context of Replenish, those early turns, I want to keep the momentum of my game plan going through a Swords or a Mana Leaf that they might have in the first few turns before they have their combo. And to get to 8 mana by turn 3 or 4, they have to have nothing. And so that's been my mentality for not choosing to play Biorhythm.
This makes perfect sense to me. There's so many cards that I just want to see somebody find a way to crack them and everything. Sometimes it's hard to let go of or pet cards or something in any deck too, but I think it makes sense where I could see it could be a win more thing too, where, like you said, if you're getting to that much mana so quickly and they actually have nothing, you're probably in fine shape anyway. And I always do forget about the fact that survival still has a big deck building restriction where when you add more non-creature spells to the deck, you run into that awkward risk of not having more things to pitch to survival. So it makes sense to me.
Question, Ben. So I know a lot of the Zoo crew play red decks like Goblins and Sligh. That could be a tough matchup for Elves. So you kind of getting your practice games in, your playtesting among a sea of red. I'm kind of curious about that. And also, I want to know a little bit more about Zoo crew overall. Like, what do you guys like to do? I've wanted to make it down to, I think, the wooden bar for some AAA night, but the last one got moved, so I'll have to try to make the next time.
Yeah, to answer your last question first, you should definitely go to Wooden Bar. It's awesome. It's a really long drive for me, but I've been and it's totally worth it. It's an excellent restaurant and bar. So magic aside, it's just a good destination. But the food is also excellent. And then the magic was great, obviously. AAA out on the town on a Friday night. It's kind of fun. But yeah, Zoo Crew's awesome. Bunch of really friendly guys. Honestly, the funniest Magic players I've been a part of the group with. And again, I'm not from New England. And so I love, when I go to all of these tournaments, I love hearing Magic cards with a New England accent. It's like just a fun thing that I get to witness. And these guys are no exclusion to that. But they love AAA. I've done Vintage Cube. Phil Lorraine. He has an excellent Vintage Cube. So they love to do that. I don't get to go out to all these things as often as I wish I could. But they're good camaraderie, really funny guys. Don't take it too serious. And yet, it's a pretty excellent Magic player. But they're also Magic players who like the colors black and red. So to play Elves around them, it would make sense that I would have to get good at playing around Engineered Plague and all the Goblins and Burn hate that you can imagine. So I don't think I don't have any actual advice. I just learned a sixth sense when I could smell an earthquake coming. And so maybe that would be advice for any up-and-coming Elves players, is to surround yourselves with as much adversity as you can.
One card you mentioned there was one that I wanted to ask you about a little bit later, but since you brought it up, why don't we dive into it right now? Engineered Plague. Specifically in your top 4 match against Chris, where he has black mana, Engineered Plague is coming, and there were points where there was an Engineered Plague in play. It seemed like you had a really good sideboard strategy for not being totally devastated by that card. How do you approach any matchup where that card's coming in?
Yeah, and that was my strategy in Peak Display. I picked the 7 cards essentially when I drew them against Chris in that match. But against Psychatog, specifically Engineered Plague decks, the way I sideboard, I want my opener to have turn 1 Manador, and then I want to turn 2 Call the Herd. And then at that point, I sometimes can just stop playing into the board. My strategy is usually I want to put a wall into play. I want to put an elephant token into play, 1 elf and 1 symbiote. The symbiotes in those post-board games, I sometimes I cut acolytes against decks that I think play these sweepers, more engineer plague than pyroclasm. And so Wirewood, or I'm just slower at playing Deranged Hermit. So Wirewood can sometimes just be a 1/1, but it's a 1/1 that lets me overextend an elf and not feel as terrible. And also, I think in my winning into top 8, I played against a Moneyball deck that was more Machine Head Moneyball hybrid. And just by having 2 Wirewoods out, I was able to make him tempted enough to put an Engineer Plague on Insect, which that's always a win. To recap, I feel like the game states that I always get to in those post-board games is just leading on an elf, going into a Call to Her to a wall, and then playing a Wirewood, and that's kind of it. Then I'm happy if that's my board until you have to then play an Engineer Plague, and then I can blow it up, and then I'll go to tank.
Makes a lot of sense.
It did feel, I mean, we'll get into it more later, but it did feel like the way you were playing, that I was being set up, you were sandbagging and only just kind of teasing out a couple threats to not get blown out by plague. So yeah, that was awesome.
One more thing there to add, it can be hard to totally sandbag because so much of your mana in those post-board games, when you cut, to pull back the curtain a little bit, I'll often cut the priests, like all of them, and Quirion Ranger, probably all of them, because those are the ones that are the most vulnerable or most exploited. And so all of a sudden you lose a lot of operating mana because your Loner Elves or Finhorn Elves, they're not getting the Quirion Ranger boost, and you're not getting those huge priest turns. And there does come a point where you just need to put material on the table to lean on Gaia's Cradle. And so that's where you're just happy putting walls on the table.
Well, that's a good little preview of the end of the Shoe City event, but kind of even leading up to it, I want to ask a little bit about, the name Shoe City itself. Like, what's the meaning behind that? And can you tell me a little bit about some of the Zoo Cruise themed events?
Yeah, so if you had asked me this question after Shoe City 1, 2, or 3, I would not be able to give you an answer. But I did hear, and I'm going to not have enough specifics to really do it credit, but Marlboro apparently is where at least some shoe factory was. So that was a big manufacturer in the area, and it's something that they identify with. And Shoe City is hosted in Marlboro, which is where Zuko is from. And so that's their claim to fame. And it also is a nice little, not quite alliteration, but it rolls off the tongue pretty good. And yeah, their tournaments are always excellent. I don't know about you, Chris, but I care more about the altars that the top 8 got in the champion card as well. Some of the most tasteful, but also it was very bold, like the top 8 stasis. And maybe you can in post throw an edit of your card on the screen, Chris.
Yeah.
That was actually one of the Zoo Crew members' wives who did the altars, but just really special looking. I think Justin Provensal's searching for the playset of stasis so that he can use them. They'll probably sit in the binder for me to look at, but they're always doing crazy things like that. I think they did awesome at Hypnotic Specters for their Halloween tournament, and they do a card to 9th place. So I think Mike Packard walked away with a humility, which is also a pretty card to give someone who got 9th place. I don't know how you feel about that, Chris. If you went 502 and got a humility, that might be the wrong way to end the tournament.
Yeah, when I saw the top 8 altar being stasis, I mean, you mentioned someone's wife did the altars. They came out, they're gorgeous. And I have a soft spot for stasis, as you all know. So I was determined. I'm like, I'm going to play my heart out, just to try to get a chance at one of these. So yeah, I'm going to be in the hunt for myself. So I'm going to get them before Justin gets his.
It's a good idea. To wrap up on their tournaments, they do a really good job of creating a fun atmosphere. For Halloween, they did a costume contest on top of the Magic tournament, which is so novel. I've never heard or thought of that. They usually do a bounty, which I know a lot of other tournaments do now too, but it's always a good time. And yeah, they're very generous. their prizes as well.
Yeah, the top 8 promos are awesome. I got a Treetop Village at Shoe City number 3, and it's just absolutely amazing. And I agree with you. The altars are way more important than any other sort of like credit or cash prize. So I really think it's really cool how Zukru puts on these events and has prizes that are very unique to the tournament themselves.
I also really like stuff like the hand painted altars because I'm a very sentimental person in general, but in Magic too, if I got anything that's like unique in any way to some kind of event, even if I don't think I'll use the card, I'll keep it forever because I want to remember that tournament and everything. And then when it's actually great cards too, like they've done, like Treetop and Stasis, still great cards in pre-modern too, then that's even great where it's like, ooh, now I'll try even harder to play this just to show it off because I love unique, like one-of-a-kind things, you'd say.
And I think it's going to be a tall order for either Justin or Chris to get the full play set of Stasis.
Yeah.
With there only being 8 of them total, and we know Ben's is in his binder, and he's not getting rid of it. It's going to be.
You know what? I do have
tough.
a nice champion card to commemorate the day with, so maybe I would be willing to give the top 8 Stasis to a friend. Who knows?
Well, you heard it here, Justin and Chris. The bidding war's on, so we'll see what's going on with that. But yeah, no, just I've got a binder of altars as well too. I'm sure we all do. I'm sure everyone who's listening, if you have some, you hold them near and dear. So they are really cool, and really appreciate that. I'm not quite sure about Shoe City being Marlboro though. I got to be honest. The first one I went to, I was talking to Brian. I said, "What is this Shoe City for?" And I googled, "What is the Shoe City in Massachusetts?" And it said it was Brockton. So I'm just saying what Google said.
That's funny. I guess one last thing to cover with the tournament. I think I don't remember if I told you this, Chris or Neal, once I won, but the idea of New York and Massachusetts being this cool rivalry where we're trading champions at each other's tournaments. It's pretty hilarious that Zoo Crew has won Zoo Crew's own tournament the last 2. So we're just in our own world, just hosting tournaments to win. So I think that's pretty funny.
I do love that. I know Phil at the very beginning was talking about the bounties and everything, and he said, "It's my tournament. I'm the bounty. If you got a problem with that, you guys got to win it." And then you guys went and won your own tournament again. So, it's your turf. You got to defend it, and the rest of us got to do a better job at Shoe City number 5.
Yeah, I think the language he used is a little more colorful than that, but I mean, we're a PG podcast, so
yeah, we're child friendly, so that if you were listening in the car, so unfortunately Phil's color, we'll say, is not going to make it into this broadcast. So we've gone over what Shoe City is. We've gone over where it is. Let's go over how it went. So Ben, obviously, we're not going to bury the lead. We mentioned it at the top. You won the tournament. Can you take us through how the day went for you? And if there were any downs to go with the ultimate up at the end?
Yeah, but before I do, we have to give Chris his flowers too. Chris top 8'd, and actually we met in the top 4, so quite an accomplishment as well. And I've got questions for him. It's his. Will you have Psychatog figured out, Chris?
Thanks. I appreciate the kind words, but you're a special guest tonight. I just want to keep the focus on you for now. If you could take us through round by round, any hiccups along the way, potentially around the middle of round 2 and 3, I think, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do a quick. I won't dive super hard into the matches because it's pretty stock stuff, but I started the day playing against Enchantress, and I'm at the point with that matchup where there's a lot of decks I played where that's just, you're a little sad when you see that it's Enchantress, but when I'm playing Elves, I think I'm doing something equally powerful, and so it's just like 2 giants, 2 ships sailing in the night. I'm able to just go under them, and I win that one pretty easily in 2. Then round 2, I actually play against my fellow Zoo Crew teammate, Justin Sheffield, and this is actually my only loss in the tournament. So again, fitting this theme of Zoo Crew toughness here. But it's also an important one. It was Red-Green Survival Madness, which I've never played against. I've done Elves versus Cradle Control, and that match is a little bit different because survival angle, they're a little bit more aggressive, and siding into my own call to herds is pretty terrible against Bastion Root Wall and Arrogant Word. So while they have red and they have sharpshooter, and I have to be worried about a pyroclasm, what I've decided is that I still need to just stay the better survival deck and try to just make them have it quickly. And if they don't, overwhelm them. But round 2, I didn't learn that fast enough, so I lost. And then, so I'm sitting at 1-1. I'm like, okay, at least I didn't go to the tournament hopes, or they're still up for a little bit. And I get paired against an Oath deck round 3, which...
Whoa.
Oh.
A second. Oh my god, I hear like something like a fire alarm going on right now. Hold on a second.
Oh,
I
yeah.
gotta go.
How could I forget this? So to allow myself to... in the middle of my game 3, where I'm on the absolute ropes, a fire alarm goes off, and every one of us on this call was here, so everybody's going to have a good opinion here to share. But I don't know about you. I left my Magic cards on the table, and my opponent and I, Justin, we were laughing. We took a really big gamble that the fire actually wasn't real. Did you all leave your cards at the table?
I left my cards at the table. I was luckily playing Goblins for the first time, and I can talk about that towards the end briefly, how I went with something a little different than I normally do. So if I lost my Goblins deck to the fire, it would have been sad, but it would not have been as sad as if I lost the deck I played more regularly. But it was very, very strange. I've never had that happen before. I'm sure it's because we had a lot more burn decks than normal in the room that probably set it off. And it's been another bad joke. I can't help myself sometimes. But yeah, went outside, saw that there was construction going on next door, and just I remember writing on my boogie board for the life total, second main phase, so we knew where we were in the match, so that when we came back in, we could just resume exactly where we were.
I actually got to give credit to Phil here, because I guess as far as the tournaments go, before they start, he's stationed in the parking lot, making sure everyone can park in a legal spot and they don't get towed. So that's awesome. And he did the announcements during the tournament. And then he's there talking to, the fire marshal and everything. And I almost thought he was about to suit up and go in with an axe just to try to help out.
It was a real life episode of The Office where they have the fire drill and everyone's running out and trying to figure out what was happening. And Phil was filling in the role of Dwight and then talking to the firefighters afterwards. But he took charge. He got everything handled quickly, told them exactly what was going on. We got back in, and quite honestly, that could have been a lot worse. It could have been a lot longer. It was handled pretty well from at least my standpoint.
I personally was a little lucky where you guys left your cards on the table, but I didn't have to think about it because we just finished our game 2. We were going to game 3, and we didn't start. So I'm like, cool, put it in the deck box, grab it in my hands with my bag. I'm not risking anything. I grabbed my mat too. I'm like, I'm protecting all my stuff and going out there, which was cool. I know some people, I heard them talking about, like, hey, do you want to go in together just to make sure we arrive at the same time at the table so there's nothing weird and everything like that? I'm like, I'm glad I don't have to think about that. I'm just like, I just walk out and back in. And yeah, Phil was doing a great job with that. I heard him saying that it seemed like there was some construction going on, like, upstairs, and like that was something they were doing was like the cause of it, where luckily there was, just to clarify, there wasn't an actual fire, it seemed, there. So luckily, once again, could have been a lot worse, like you said, but just was a little false alarm there.
All right, so we all survived the non-fire. We all got back inside, and the tournament rolled on. So Ben had round 3 and the rest of it go.
Yeah, for me, the fire was real because round 3, I played against Bloody Oath. I have not played against the Bloodfire Colossus in a long time, and I definitely didn't want to see it when I was playing Elves. Yeah, he played a turn 2 Oath, and Oath did the Bloodfire Colossus, and I was like, this is it. This is how my day ends. But I just kept playing, and I won the match, and I won that game. It was absurd. He had, at one point, 2 Bloodfire Colossus in play, but I think possibly he made a mistake where he chose not to pop it because he wanted to get a second Bloodfire Colossus, but he only had 1 red mana, and I got to the position where I had a priest, a symbiote and a wall in play with a Cradle and 4 mana. So on the deciding turn, I was able to put a Kamahl on the stack, which he had to respond to. Otherwise, he'd lose all his lands when he pops the Bloodfire, or I'd buff my team to live through it. And once he was forced to pop it, I was able to flip 12 mana, and I had a survival going at the time. And so from there, I was able to put a win with the Resolved Kamahl and 12 mana. But I was just slowly putting Anger in the graveyard and setting it up. And that was just like a shocking win. I can't believe I came out of that. And so once I did, I felt like maybe this tournament I am going to be a little luckier. There's a little bit of destiny going on here, because that's got to be a 90-10 matchup. So after that, though, I play against Naya Terragen, which it seems like, Sam, I don't know if that's the list that you have put out into the world, but I'm happy to see that Naya Terragen is taking off.
Oh yeah, I saw multiple people at the event, and some even told me they were playing the list, and I felt like a proud grandfather or something too. I'm like, ooh, it seems like I have some sort of impact, which is cool. I feel famous.
Absolutely. But it's just a matchup I'm very comfortable with. I know, unless they're playing a weird list, they might have one Cataclysm game 1 that could get me, but that's even pretty unlikely. And then game 2, Pyroclasm it's almost easier to play around than Engineer play, and especially from that deck where the red mana is not always a guarantee. And so I was able to take that one down pretty easily, but my opponent played well. And then round 5, I get to play against Doomwake, which has been so cool that he's been going to our pre-modern tournaments. And he was on, this is my rematch against Red Green Survival Madness. This time I know what to do, and I'm able to win that one pretty easily just by being the aggressive deck the whole time. And then that leads me to round 6, where at this point I'm 4-1, but I'm unable to draw in. And so my melee opponent's name is Jundam Out. So I was immediately put into a position to think of what a Jund player would be playing at pre-modern. And I did expect it, but Machine Head is a pretty good guess. So that was actually a pretty crazy match where I thought it was going to be very easy, but game 2, the power of just Dark Ritual into a turn 2 Masticore, I was like, I forgot that this is in the range of what you could do, quite strong. And then game 3, we had an epic flood. We both drew lands for probably 5 turns in a row where we had huge boards, but we were staring at each other. My board was a bunch of squirrels and elephants, but he had one Nantuko Shade with about 10 mana, so I wasn't getting through. And I ripped a Kamahl off the top, and that quickly ended the game. But I was crossing my fingers for about 10 turns that he wouldn't draw a Perish. I'm almost positive he had a Perish in the deck. And so that puts me in the top 8. At this point, that match took so long, I had no idea who was in top 8 or what I might be playing. But if I knew, I would probably be playing against Rich Shay on Sligh, which ended up being what I played in the quarterfinals. Neal, I don't know much about this list, but that's probably something we're talking about. It was not a conventional Sligh list. It was doing some cool things. Do you know anything about it?
Oh, a little bit about it. I talked to Rich after the tournament, and he told me that my list from Sacred Torch was the inspiration for him to play Sligh. It was very similar to my list. One main difference was main deck Ensnaring Bridge, which I thought was interesting, and we talked about. He collaborated with Iron Lungs from the Burn Ward Discord, currently renamed the Jackal Pup Appreciation Society. There's some people in there who don't like Jackal Pup. There's some people who do. The people with admin access do. So we've changed it for at least the foreseeable future. So Rich was able to collaborate with Iron Lungs. Those are 2 very strong players with a great knowledge of Burn. They put together a list and made top 8. Rich did have Wastelands. The one card that I questioned a little bit in his sideboard that he mentioned, yes, I wouldn't play it again, was Pyrostatic Pillar. Don't think that that's something the Burn deck wants to do, but other than that, I really, really like the list, and obviously it's great to see Rich off of Enchantress and on a red deck again. So that's a big win for everybody.
Absolutely. I was so happy. I, as an Elves player, was very unhappy that he was playing Sligh, but I was very excited to see because Rich has just been kicking all of our butts when he plays Enchantress. Happy to see him switch to something else so that we maybe have another shot. And I'm also going to take a little bit of credit that hopefully our matchup dictated on how we felt about Pyrostatic Pillar, because while that card would have been excellent against me on turn 2, he ended up only having it at the end of the game where it was actually costing him life and the ability to maneuver in a way that would have put him in a more advantageous position. So that I'm going to pretend that's why he doesn't like it.
You get full credit for that. Absolutely.
So Ben, I just want to give you a heads up for the future. If you don't know what you're playing against in a top 8 and Hodge is there, Hodge gets all the decks that people are playing and makes it available to everyone. So just a shout out to our beloved commissioner of the CCL, Hodge. You the man. Keep up the good work. And Ben, that would have been good to know that you were up against Sligh for mulligan purposes and whatnot.
Absolutely.
kudos
Hodge
for-
is an institution for that. And such an institution that what I didn't know, and Hodge wasn't immediately around me, Rich had no problem telling me what he was playing when I asked, because I knew everybody probably knew what we were playing. So there was no awkwardness when I asked Rich Shay what he was playing, and we easily divulged our decks.
That's some good sportsmanship. Rich, I thought for sure he was going to play Enchantress for this tournament. I actually said to Brian, with the amount of Sligh that I expected, Enchantress would have been my top choice if I had more experience with the deck. And I thought that Rich was going to win the whole tournament with Enchantress. But he proved us wrong by playing a different deck, and you proved us wrong by beating him in the top 8.
And just to briefly touch on some of our games, the way it played out. Game 1, so I'll go a little deeper because these are top 8 matches against excellent players, so they're a little bit more fun to listen to probably. But game 1, I mulled to 6, but it was the exact hand that I would want game 1 against Burn. I think it was 3 lands, 1 drop, Wall of Roots, and then a Hermit. And so the plan was just curve into Hermit, and I could do so fairly reliably because I knew I had 3 land drops already rolled up. So I could freely trade with Jackal Pups or Seal of Fires on my initial creatures, which is likely to happen. And then one of them was a wall, so I knew it wasn't going to die unless it ate 2 bird spells, which is going to trade a lot of time. And so I do this, I execute this plan, and I'm about a turn short. I get Rich to 2. And I had one decision where I had 3 mana. At this point, I've drawn a Yapamaya Granger, and I had an Anger in my hand. And so I had the opportunity to... So actually, I'm at 4 mana at this point, so I could have played the Anger or the Granger. The Granger guarantees that I could play the Hermit on 5, or I could have played the Anger, the card I would much rather have thrown to the fire, so that the follow-up Hermit had haste. The catch there would be I needed to rip the land still. So I chose to lead on Granger because I thought guaranteeing Hermit was the more important play. And I ended up losing by a turn. So I don't think I don't think I drew the land either. So I don't think it's one of those things that matter. But it's one of those things that I go back and I think a little bit more about, or just wish you could have played it maybe a little bit differently. So then moving on to game 2 and 3, I execute my full red hate sideboard plan. And it's actually crazy. At this point, I haven't seen Ensnaring Bridge from Rich's list. So I think he's more of a normal burn list, just maybe featuring Wasteland. And I keep the similar hand that I described is great against Chris, which is just mana elf into turn 2 call. And so I actually became the aggressive deck. I went turn 2 call, turn 3 flashback call, and just put Rich in a really awkward position with these hate pieces. And I had a survival in my hand that I could have played early, but I prioritized the damage from getting an early call. I thought that was important. And then I think the other takeaway was very important to Rich kept 7, and it was a 7-card hand that didn't have a 1-drop. And so he was playing in a way that was very implicative of earthquakes in his hand, possibly more than one, which ended up being the case for the game. He earthquaked maybe 2 or 3 times. And so it was, the choke point was he was on 3 lands for quite a bit, and I was able to put a board of elephants, walls, and Wall of Roots and Wall of Blossoms into play. So there was never quite a great opportunity for him to Earthquake for maximum value. And something really important to keep in mind in the Sligh matchup against a very competent Sligh player is the Wall of Roots management. So making sure that I didn't put one Wall of Roots into range of any one of his burn spells, trying to make him have to reuse like a Lavamancer plus the Earthquake or a Seal plus a block on a 1/1 attacker. All of those things really mattered in the match, and I think were very important for me to take it.
Yeah, you had the perfect game plan there. When I'm playing Sligh, Elves is a deck I don't want to play against. And you might think that Earthquake is good because there's a bunch of 1/1s and you can sweep them and then go wide with your board after you've taken them out. But you named two cards that stop that happening on two different axes. You play Call of the Herd, and now we're taking damage from elephants. Then we're taking damage from our own Earthquake. And then we really can't leverage our life total profitably later in the game. Or it's the other route where there's Wall of Roots, like you said, and now we have to burn resources. I know I'm just repeating what you're saying, but it just really echoes my sentiment of why I don't want to play against Elves when I'm playing Sligh.
It's good. I'm glad you brought it up too. I totally forgot. The big reason why I want to be aggressive, I hadn't even seen Pyrostatic Pillar, but I knew there were Earthquakes in his list. And to make him Earthquake for 3 multiple times, I just wanted to put him in a position where that hitting his own life mattered quite a bit. And like you said, it absolutely does.
That's kind of the downfall with some of these cards in Sligh, and not to just make everything about Sligh, but I love talking about it. So we're gonna have our Sligh minute here.
You are one of the preeminent recent winners with Sligh, right? So your opinion does carry some weight here, Neal.
Appreciate that. There are cards that, in Earthquake's less in this regard, but Sulfuric Vortex and Pyrostatic Pillar are more so. Anything that damages your own life total, you have to be cognizant of, because your opponent sees it too, and they're going to find a way to get some extra damage out of it. And you don't want your answer or your big sideboard card that is supposed to fix your matchup actually cost you the game. Now, I'm not saying Earthquake does this all the time. Earthquake's a card I play in my sideboards. It's great. But other ones like Sulfuric Vortex and Pyrostatic Pillar, they're probably going to lose you more games than you're going to win.
Yeah, it was also Rich shared after the match that he left Jackal Pup in some quantity. And I think historically Sligh players will like to play Pup and then clear the way for Pup with their Seal and their Shocks. But I think these latest Sligh lists aren't set up to do that because they're not playing Lava Dart. And Jackal Pup on top of Jackal Pup and Earthquake is not a good combination.
Lava Dart is one of the best cards against Goblins and Elves, but we haven't seen too much of it. So a lot of the people are leaving them at home, but maybe it's time to bring them back.
I was going to say the lava darts. I at one point had 4 in my 75. I'm like, that's the one you'd really want in Elves.
And I haven't touched on it yet, but I think Elves has been an underdog this past year since I've been playing the deck, and this tournament is no exception to that. And that's a big advantage. We could go on about cards that I don't want to see. A Lava Dart's one of them, and I know it's definitely not optimal for Sligh to play it now, and that's one thing I'm going to take advantage of.
Absolutely, that's definitely important for metagame calls and how any deck is constructed for any tournament. Looking into what sideboard cards you can use, what matchups you're expecting. This is very basic stuff, but in pre-modern more than anything else, it feels like the sideboards are always so tight. So some of these silver bullets that are very, very good in some matchups, you got to leave them at home if you're not expecting them. And then if you're playing the decks that are good against those cards that are left at home, you have a great advantage. So you made a great call for this tournament and obviously played very well and got a good matchup, but that's not all of it. You have to play tight. You did that. And let's talk about your top 4 matchup as well, too, because that was against someone who may or may not be on this call right now.
We should let Chris kick off the conversation.
I pretty much got dumpstered in the top 4. So if you want to talk about the finals, we can. All right, fine. We can touch on the top 4, I guess. Ben is the higher seed, putting me on the draw. the most important card for him against me is survival. He keeps 7, and I have a decision. Like, I don't have a duress or my one main deck null, and I don't have foil. But I think if he doesn't have survival, my hand is set up pretty well that I can stabilize and take control. So I decided to keep. He went turn 1 elf, turn 2 survival, and that was basically a wrap. I was gonna lose eventually, and he gave me no breathing room. I could have potentially taken 1 mulligan to look for a duress or the annul. I think if I mull to 6 and have to foil, that I'm just going to be down too many resources. So that doesn't seem like it's a good line. But it's also possible that he's just happy with his 7 and it doesn't contain survival, and he's just trying to value me with Symbiote, Acolyte, or something, which is still good. But as long as I can counter survival, I think I'm okay. So anything you'd like to add to that game 1, Ben?
First, I want to say I haven't had the opportunity to do it, but when we played, it reminded me of it. Chris, I just want to compliment you as a Magic player. You're everything I try to be. You're so deliberate and technical as a player. It's a joy to play against you, and you play at
Thank you.
You play at a pace that is, I use the word deliberate. It's clear what actions you're taking. You're not moving so fast that anything could be misconstrued and cause confusion for an opponent. And I really appreciate that. And I try to emulate it. And then on top of that, you're just a very nice person. So you're the full package as a Magic player there, Chris. So
oh my
just wanted
gosh,
to get that out there.
That's so kind.
I really
Thank you.
enjoy. I watched your Stasis videos when you won, and then when you did it the ELD monthly, and I could just tell the way you quickly played your islands that this dude knew what's up. And then I've just seen you at a couple of the other monthlies, and I just think you're really the Magic player.
Thank you very much. Right back at you. I always enjoy playing against you, and I was so happy to see you. Well, I don't want to spoil the finish, but the matchup and everything, but just from your journey with Elves to the top 8 of LobsterCon, and then your redemption against Replenish. I was very happy to see you win. So congratulations again.
Definitely. And my thoughts in this matchup, I was just enjoying it while it lasted, because while you said I was dumpstering you, I knew what awaited me. Replenish was already in the finals, and I was just getting ready for my chops to be licked there. I had an obnoxiously good 7 against Chris, and it played out that way. I had survival under his counterspell, and so it would have put him in a position where he needed to foil, be in a low resource game right off the bat, or have the duress, which honestly I didn't even think about. Duress would have been pretty great there. And so it's cool to hear your thought process there, Chris. But that hand wasn't going to get stopped. It was really strong. And then I could pivot the conversation and moving to game 2. This is where, and I haven't played against Psychatog in a little while, but this is specifically your version, Chris, where you have Sickening Dreams. I had to think about it a little bit more. I started to take all my Quirion Rangers out and all my priests out, but I almost took all the Wirewoods out for Wall of Blossoms, just because I wanted to have no X1s. But then I decided, I was like, I do want to be able to pressure your life total with some of these early creatures to play around counter spells. So I decided not to bring the Wall of Blossoms in. So I think I still brought in probably around 10 cards for you, Chris. But that's not I don't flatter Psychatog too much. I do that for almost every match. I bring in about 10 cards.
Yeah. So for game 2, I brought in Plagues and a couple of Powder Kegs and 2 more Annuls, just trying to be ready for survival. And I port in turn 1. I'm able to set up my first 3 land drops, and I think you go for your turn 1 elf, turn 2 wall, into maybe another elf, and then a call. And I counter the first call, and I've not made my 4th land drop, so I pass with a counter up. I have 2 islands and swamp, and I have counterspell, annul, and Psychatog, I think. And basically, I'm looking for the 4th land because I'm really worried about getting baited by a spell and then you having a survival. but you're also kind of developing your board. So I think I'm at 18 and you have 5 mana up. You play a morph. Obvious. Well, not obvious that I'm assuming it's Vigilante. I guess it could be a Tribal Force Mage and you're going for a bluff, but you still have the Call to Hurt in your graveyard that you can flash back. So I'm thinking like, okay, maybe he just wants to get the Nantuko down in case I have Plague, to kind of neutralize the effect. You still had 2 cards in your hand and then the Call in the graveyard. So I kind of went with a play where I'm thinking, well, I can counter this, and if he has survival, I'm in a really rough spot. I can potentially wait a turn to try to draw my 4th land so that I can go Tog plus a null. But if I don't hit my land drop the next turn, then you've further developed your board. You can get me down to 13. Then you flash a call. Then what do I do? So I sort of went with the math, thinking that, hoping that you didn't have survival. And I think I just misread the situation. I probably should have taken a gamble that I would hit a land. Maybe I could have even stabilized after a couple draw steps if I ended up at like 8 life or something. That might have been enough. It's just a really tough spot because if I have to constantly hold mana up for counterspell or a null on the survival, then you can draw anything off the top with your mana. You can draw a Hermit, Kamahl if you still have that in, and another call. So I don't know. It was like a pretty tough spot for me, but I think I honestly don't know what the right plays I've been thinking about for days. That's why I look so tired. And Brian, if you can smooth out some of the bags that are my eyes, I'd appreciate that in post.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we talked about it a little bit more. From my perspective, then I told you this. I would just love to, and this is a revolutionary strategy, but it's just putting the low value chips onto the table first and just chipping in as much as I can. And so if that's my plan, the thing that I'm actually most worried about is you quickly having a Psychatog on the table, because once that's out there, I can't really attack unless I'm ending it, right? And so you having the Psychatog in your hand, I think, and this is all hindsight, I think waiting, and this is also me having lower value on the engineered play because I know the way that I can play the game around it. But maybe because there's already an elephant on the table and a call in the graveyard, you should be less afraid of the fact that the Nantuko can already answer it and just play for the Psychatog stall, and then, because Psychatog beats elephants, right? So maybe that is the way that it should have unfolded, which is just you could wait a few more turns for that 4th land drop, because once you're at 10, I don't know, once you're at such a low life, I do go so wide, it is hard. So I can see why you were thinking about it for so long.
It was
Chris.
a really tough spot. Yeah. I think I did the math after, and essentially I had, because I cast Portent turn 1, I had between Gush and the remaining lands, it was like 24 out of 49, and then, or it was like 24 out of 50, and then if I missed there, it's 24 out of 49. So kind of had like 2 coin flips there. But yeah, I don't know. It's tough because I pride myself on like my reading ability, as like corny as it might sound. But you weren't giving off anything, so you stone faced, and I couldn't pick up on any tells, and then I just ultimately went for what I thought potentially greedy, but it also, yeah, if I'm missing the land drops, I'm going to be so low life total that you could just be really wide, and that even to the point where Sickening Dreams is going to hurt me.
It's true. Yeah, forget it. We've got that earthquake conversation all over again.
But yeah, you played it great, and that sets you up for a finals match against Replenish and your shot at redemption.
I did. It was great. I've been messaging with an Elves pilot who I believe he top eighted Spanish Nationals this year with Elves ahead of my LobsterCon, and he reached out to me in the Discord. And so a lot of the reason I've still been playing Elves is just to get more data for him. He has another tournament coming up. I believe his name's Sebastian. And in his testing of the list that I played at Shoe City, he said I've been really preoccupied with the Replenish matchup because it's been this monkey on my back since it knocked me out of LobsterCon. And he play tested the matchup, and he said he actually was playing with friends and he beat Replenish and then he lost to Terrageddon. And so we were laughing about that for a minute because of how we feel about the Terrageddon matchup. And it just reminded me that those matchups are still, nothing's like, that's what Magic's so great. It's variable to a degree, right? So you always have these opportunities, and there's always an angle to still win despite it being a poor matchup. So I decided that was a contributing factor why I eased off the plow under plan. And I was just like, if you make them have it, that's true. And it makes it harder to have. They really need Opal Wave by turn 5 against Elves game 1. And that does happen a lot, but it is a little easier said than done. And so going into the finals match, I played against Chris before, and he's a great pilot and a really nice guy. It was a very enjoyable match. And I just knew that I had nothing to lose because it's a matchup that I didn't expect to win. So I got to play very loose and just enjoy it. And game 1, I made him have it by turn 5, and he did. And I got him to 2 life, which is very reminiscent of my LobsterCon quarterfinals loss, where I got my opponent to 1 life. And so I was like, oh, not again. History's repeating itself. But game 2, I had an excellent draw where I had turn 4 win on the play. I also had a crypt, but it didn't matter. And then game 3, it was the exact type of game I needed to have happen, which is I put a turn 4 or 5 win on the table and just had to hope that my opponent didn't have the full combo. I had 3 natural eyes in my hand, so 1 wave wouldn't have done it. And my opponent couldn't even find the wave, so I got lucky there that the game didn't get to continue at all. So it was very stressful, and it's one of those matchups where I'm doing so much and it gets erased in one draw step with Replenish. So every turn where I was just, is it over? Did you do it? And it never happened. So I got to be the champion. One piece of technology that I forgot to talk about from LobsterCon that's specific for this matchup and how I lost, where I put my opponent to 1, where I flooded out on answers. I switched the 2 Tranquil Domains in the sideboard to 2 more Nantuko Vigilantes. And that's been maybe my second favorite change that I've done to the deck since adding Wall of Roots. I took some of the inspiration from, I think a lot of people were talking about The Rock, just having a lot of success playing Nantuko Vigilante in the main is Apriya. And it just being a really good card. 3-2 actually hits pretty hard. It trades with a lot. And the effect is just universally really good. And it's been really good. Chris, it was great against you, having it as something that could pressure your life total and answer played. It's great against Moneyball, and it's also great in these situations against Replenish, where I want to have the answer to wave, but I also need to pressure your life total. That would be another call out that I want to mention.
Yeah, it's a real interesting way to attack it. Quite literally attacking it. So appreciate you sharing that technology. And again, congrats on the big win and taking down the tournament. Well deserved. You played really well. You had a plan. You executed it and took the whole thing down. So well done, Ben. Great job.
Thank you.
I know we talked briefly about Chris also making the top 8, and I want to just point out that with the CCL standings, Chris is extending his lead as the frontrunner for the Player of the Year. Sam is right on his heels in second, so we've got kind of an arms race going on this podcast. Chris, we heard about the top 4 match. Do you want to talk about your tournament a little bit as well too? And then we can, Sam, give you some time to talk about Terrageddon and how you did as well.
Yeah, sounds good
Sure,
to me.
I'll just go through the matchups and like the results because I don't want to get into it too much. But yeah, so round 1, I played against Mono Blue Frantic Storm, and I think I got pretty lucky to win game 1 just before he could combo. Game 2, he stormed off and I got milled out. And game 3, Haunting Echoes kind of neutralized a lot of his deck, and I was able to just get the win. Round 2, I played against Sligh, and I won that one 2-0. round 3, I played against Replenish, Chris Alexander, the Ben's finals opponent, and I won that one in 2 games. And then I played against Sam White, the Terragant Master, in round 4, and really close. I lost the first game, and sideboard cards kind of came up clutch for me, being Dominate specifically. And round 5, I got paired down, and the opponent couldn't draw, but he was playing Oath Spec, and I couldn't find a Psychatog or a Smother or any answer for his Treetop Village for the longest time. Game 1, and eventually find a Psychatog, get it down, and my graveyard is stacked, and he has Swords of Plowshares, and I have no counter. So I just pump to gain a ton of life, just extends the game, and eventually he wins a long game 1. I think it took like 35 minutes. Game 2, I'm able to win. This was kind of a cool play I'll mention. Just he had Terravor in play, and I had 6 lands, and he goes for a Cataclysm, and I dominate the Terravor, and then I have Gush also, and he tries the Swords of Terravor, and then I foil that, let the Cataclysm resolve, and just beefed up the Terravor. So I win that game, and there's only a few minutes left, so we just decide to draw, and he was hoping to win the round 6 to make it at 4-0-2. And then I ID'd in round 6. So I was 4-0-2 going to the top 8, where I faced off against Terrageddon, and I won that one in 3 games. Almost closed it out in 2, but I had to fade 1 draw step. And he had Pyroblast to trample over, and that was that. So game 3, fortunately, Dominate came up clutch, took Terravor, and then my tournament was ended by the excellent play of Ben.
Chris, I watched a lot of your matches. Dominate looked awesome. I pulled out my Mox Field for my Psychatog list and added Dominate in my sideboard mid-tournament watching you play.
Nice. Yeah, I'd been on Control Magic since April, and it's sort of been a pet card of mine. But with Moneyball being on the decline locally, I just thought I would really prefer to have Dominate against some of the other matchups, like Terravor and even, Psychatog Mirrors or Growtog. It's a nice spell to play on the end step and, force the action. So
It's a scary card to think about once you know your opponent has it. I was even thinking about it in our matchup, how aggressively I wanted to attack with, say, an Elephant and like a Wirewood, right? I might not chip in with it anymore if you know about Dominate. So psychologically, it's a very strong card too.
Yeah.
I think your opponent, again, shout out to Sam Higgins. He's been doing a lot of having a lot of great finishes with 4 and 5 color Terrageddon decks. I think he even said because it was Dominate and not Control Magic, he had less outs to win the game, because obviously he's got Naturalize effects, Red Blasts, and with it being just pure Dominate, you really minimized his draw steps to get out of that situation.
Dominate is definitely a very scary card from the Terrageddon side, I can confirm. When Dreadnought started to stop playing it in their sideboards in favor of Essence Flare, I was ecstatic. I'm like, oh, that's always the trickiest card to play around too, where you can get the biggest blowout or die to your own things and everything. And yeah, my match against Chris, it was exceptionally a lot better than Control Magic would have been in the spots. Got my Gibbons real good. My pet card, dying to my own pet card.
Cool. Well, speaking of pet card and that matchup, Sam, why don't you tell us how your tournament went?
So my tournament started off well. Round 1, I played against Blue-White Land still. Typically a good matchup. I won that 2-0. Round 2, I played against someone I thought was on Esper Control normally, but it turned out to be on 5-color Sliver. It was a very interesting match, but I was able to get there 2-1. So 2-0. Going in the round 3, I play my first mirror match of the day in this tournament, where the person afterwards said, yeah, I believe this is your list. And I'm like, oh my God, it's so great. I'm seeing the terror getting everywhere. I'm like, ooh, maybe the primer's having a big impact. And it was interesting games, but I was able to get there, secure my 3-0 start. I'm feeling good because we're 6th round. So I'm like, if I win next round, hopefully can double draw him. And then, of course, when I see Chris's 3-0, we get paired against each other because the team pairing seems to always happen at any event. Chris has had my number lately in the matchup, but it's a matchup that I find really fun to play, just always a long slog. Chris talked about that already, where we had three interesting games, but he was able to just get me in turns with a dominate on my hidden gibbon. My own pet card turned against me. So we're 3-1, still alive though, feeling good. But then, of course, I play against another teammate the next round for my second Naya Terrageddon Mirror, and I was able to take that down in 3. So 4-1, was hoping I could draw, but I went over it with Hodge. Shout out to Hodge, he's always the biggest help here. And it seemed like even with everybody else playing out, that if I drew at my opponent, I was probably going to get 9th. So I'm like, I got to play this out. And it is my 3rd Naya Terrageddon Mirror of the tournament. And this is the match that really got to me, where last week we talked about how good your mental game is and everything in Magic. And this is the most tilted I've been within myself in many months, where I had a game pretty much locked up there, and I was trying to go fast because our game 1 was going really long. And I talked about a little how I play slow and everything too, and I try to go fast. I was trying to do stuff quicker, and basically I needed to tap a land and my Rashad import to port him, but for some reason I tapped my Werebear and the land, even though I purposely wanted to leave the Werebear up, and that essentially lost me the match because I needed the blocker, and I just tapped for no reason, and I was upset about that. Missing out on top 8, but I heard Chris was locked in there, it seems, so I was good, happy for him, happy for the team, but it was still a good tournament, despite that one really costly mistake, which just can't take it into other matches and everything. It's always just good to move on and focus, once again, tournament match the match.
Yeah, the misplays and tough losses, they can sting very much in the moment. I made my fair share of them this past tournament as well, too. I've made my fair share of them throughout my entire Magic playing career. And it's tough to power through them. But at the end of the day, we learn something from them, and we're able to grow as a Magic player. I think you handled yourself really well there, despite being in a tough spot. And obviously you have a positive outlook on it right now. And you know you're going to leave Werebear on blocks next time, and it's not a mistake you're ever going to make again.
Hopefully. That's the goal. Sometimes you need to get scarred by one thing to not do it again. I've had that happen, many different interactions in different formats. Sometimes when it happens once, it pays off in the long term. So it is good to think about like that.
Exactly. Well, I'll just quickly touch on my deck choice in the tournament in a more macro sense. I decided that for this tournament, I didn't want to play Sligh, which under normal circumstances, that's my code word for that I've been kidnapped, I'm being held hostage, find me wherever I am right now. But I made a conscious decision that I was not going to play Sligh for this. And I ended up playing Goblins, so at least I still had Basic Mountain in my deck. I've never played Goblins before. I started with Andy Dominguez's list from Sacred Torch, and I read Golgari Guy's primer on the deck a couple days before and felt confident with the information that he had in there. I felt good with Andy's list. I made some changes to the sideboard based on the primer as well, too, and went in kind of blind with it. But I gained a big appreciation for the deck because when you think Goblins, and maybe that's just how I think, oh, this is just an aggro deck. You play turn 1 Lackey, and that's all the one gear it really has. You're just aggressive, you're playing creatures each turn, and you attack and you kill them, or you don't turn the corner and you lose. And that was not my experience. Obviously, the turn 1 Lackey starts are great, but the deck has a way to grind out of tough situations that I did not appreciate whatsoever. Having the Goblin Matron toolbox, it's not as strong as Survival of the Fittest. It's not repeatable, but you do get to play some silver bullets where you can have certain cards for certain matchups, like Goblin Sharpshooter. And Goblin Ringleader is a hell of a card. Who would have thought that a 4-mana 2/2 would be good in this format, but the ability to just, even sometimes if you only draw 2 cards, and let's not even count the situations where you chain Ringleader into Ringleader, it just allows you to come back from these tough board stalls. I ran into that all day, and I'm glad I was able to push my assumptions. We've talked on here before on how Goblins is a deck I've never really given too much credit to, but it always performs well. I thought this was going to be a one-and-done situation, but I really enjoyed playing the deck, and I'll probably play it again at some point. Just high level. I went 4-2 in the tournament, had a lot of fun. I wrote a report about this. You can find that on my Substack, which will be in the show notes, where I'll go into a little bit more detail if you want to see that as well too, where I break down the matches a little bit more. And yeah, I was just very happy with the deck. I will say, and Ben, you can apologize to Justin Moore for me. When he found out I was playing Goblins, he asked if I was playing Goblin Goon, and I did not have that in my 75. I said I didn't own the card. I didn't have experience with it, so I decided to not play Goblin Goon. And he looked at me absolutely disgusted and said, "Why are we even having this conversation?"
Did you literally tell him that you don't have it? Because I know we have a plethora of Goblin Goons that are stamped to give away to people. So maybe you maybe send him a Discord message and he'll hook you up.
I will have to do that. Yeah, he was not happy. I'll say that I didn't have the Goblin Goon, but if you have some goons at the ready, I'll send him a ping in Discord for sure. One other thing I wanted to mention was driving to the tournament. I was listening to Spike Colony on the way in, and Lanny and Mike were talking about our podcast, and Lanny specifically said, "Factor Fiction, go give it a listen. They're doing great stuff on there." And that was kind of an out-of-body experience a little bit on the way there. I know that sounds cheesy, but it was kind of cool. And we're only a few episodes in, but I appreciate them shouting us out. I appreciate the mention on Spike Colony, and appreciate everyone for listening, because we're having a lot of fun here, and we're hoping you're getting some information out of it too. But it was really surreal. And then driving, I was like, that's really cool. And then immediately after that, my check engine light came on, so that brought me back to even as well too. So everything's perfectly balanced in this world. We also want to take this opportunity to shout out DuressFest one more time. We had Shane on last episode talking about all the goals and deadline of August 19th to get this Kickstarter funded. We're all signed up. Ben, are you signed up for DuressFest?
I'm actually not. Don't follow my example. You should sign up as soon as possible. Matter of fact, I'll probably do so right after this call.
There we go. We've got another sign up as a result of this call. We're imploring everyone to take the opportunity to go to DuressFest.com, sign up, get your spot now. Duress Crew is hoping to host the largest pre-modern tournament of all time. We're excited to be a part of it. We've donated for the crew map. If you have a crew, you want to get yourself on the map, you can do that as well too. Again, it's DuressFest.com. We're excited to potentially be a part of this if the Kickstarter gets funded, and the only way it's going to get funded is if you're able to donate as well. So please go to DuressFest.com and pledge today. We're getting close to wrapping up this episode. Wanted to take the opportunity to thank you all for listening. We really do appreciate it. We're hoping to put more content out for you that you can enjoy. The pre-modern community is a huge part of all of our lives, and we're happy to contribute to it as well. If you have the opportunity to give us a follow on wherever you consume your podcasts, that way you'll never miss when another episode comes out. Ben, Again, appreciate you coming on the episode. Congratulations for winning the Shoe City Showdown number 4. Do you have anything you want to shout out? Anyone you want to thank? Anything you have in these closing minutes?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, just the whole pre-modern community at large for the excellent attitude when it comes to playing Magic, and then the culture and all the people who organize tournaments. It's so much work, and everybody does such a good job making it feel special. And without people like you, I don't get to win a tournament. We don't even get to play. I don't get to beat anyone. Really can't understate how important all the work that you guys do is. And then another special shout out just to everybody who, like, again, this culture and community, like in this call, I've messaged Chris and I've messaged Brian to talk about decks, and everybody's just so forthcoming with information. And so just the way we all share and contribute keeps this fun and moving forward. So I hope everybody continues to do it. Feel free to ask me questions if you want. I'm happy to answer. I learn from them too, so it's always good. And then more specifically, just all the people at Weekly Tuesdays at ELBs. It's a great time. You should all go and have fun. We don't take it too seriously. And then all the people who, the Zoo crew for adopting me into their crew, and all the people who have played Magic with me, whether it's back at Pittsburgh or here in Massachusetts. So, and Factor Fiction
Awesome.
becoming a podcast. There's more media to consume because there's never enough of it for True Modern. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. That's why we wanted to make the podcast. We want more information out there. We're happy to share it with everybody and just continue the conversation. That's how we grow the game. We talk about it. We support local tournaments, and we keep it moving forward because it's the best format there is. And I can't see there being a format better coming around anytime soon through some sort of universes beyond mechanic. Well, as I said, appreciate you all for listening. We appreciate Zoo Crew and Webway for hosting Shoe City Showdown. Appreciate Ben, you for coming on. This has been another episode of Factor Fiction, and we will see you at the beginning of the next upkeep. Thank you, everyone.